Good morning, Wisconsin. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this presentation at your Civil 3D workshop. I'd also like to thank Autodesk, your main sponsor of this event. I'm going to be going over today is INDOT's BIM and project management approach. I will say that INDOT is still very much in a pilot mode research phase to figure out the best course of action. And so what I'm going to talk about is not necessarily exactly what we're going to do. Some of them are my opinions, but will definitely be considered heavily in the decision making when it comes time for our future. My name is Andrew Pangallo. I am INDOT Major Projects Construction Manager. Just a brief bio of my position. I am currently managing the construction on our I-69 finish line corridor that stretches from Martinsville, Indiana to the I-465 loop around the city of Indianapolis. I'm also providing support for some of our other major projects around the Indiana, and namely around in our central Indiana region. Also working on some of our future major projects as well. But I do believe by leveraging technology innovation, risk can be reduced or fully mitigated during construction that will enable INDOT to deliver all these major projects we have going on today. I live in central Indiana, the town of Margarettsville, Indiana. I have a wife and 3 young kids and enjoy staying active playing golf and softball. So as I said before, I want to explain just the background and what we're doing here on the I-69 finish line and what it's doing for our agency in general as far as innovating and moving forward with our asset management and BIM needs. So just a brief overview of what is the I-69 finish line. So I'll give you just a map of this corridor. You can get a glimpse of the total construction limits. Down here is that city of Martinsville. And then here's the 465 loop around Indianapolis. This stretch right here is 26 miles total, with 9 miles on 465 stretching over 4 years. So you can see quite a bit of effort and planning going along with this. Just some more highlights of this. Say 26 miles on I-69 itself. You can see we have 4 lanes, 2 in each direction up to a certain point. We get up to 6 lanes. And then finally 8 lanes as we get to the new system interchange. And then even on 465 itself, we're up to 12 lanes. So tons of new pavement. A lot of this up here is actually brand new alignment. This is actually the only new interstate right now in the nation being built. And as well, we're also creating 10 interchanges from an existing 92 access points on this old state road. Just some other things to just show the magnitude of this corridor project. So thousands of soil borings were completed in order to do our geotechnical engineering here and identify any hazardous materials, as there's a lot of industrial type and commercial sites there along the corridor and the right of way we got to take. And that amounts to about 7 million cubic yards of fill and then 3 million cubic yards of cut. And this all needs to happen in about 3 to 4 years. So typically it has not performed this much earthwork before in a time period. So it definitely kind of highlights the risk involved with this. We're talking about 74 bridge replacements or rehabilitations, and most of those being brand new bridge structures. And then also 70,000 feet of retaining walls. So in order not to take too much right away in some of these sensitive areas and businesses, obviously would bring a lot of retaining wall, which brings its own risks. And then finally, there's over 3 million square yards of pavement, and any bit of mix of asphalt, concrete. We actually kind of alternate just by coincidence and MOT scheme costs that we actually kind of flip from pavement, asphalt pavement, concrete pavement, asphalt, and back to concrete pavement again. Those are all reasons for that. And then to highlight them more, just new utility lines. You can see some staggering numbers here. Some miles of new water lines, sewer lines, power lines, and gas lines. And then also our telecom, and to the hundreds of different relocations that need to be happen, to the hundreds of millions of dollars. So obviously, if you've worked with utility lines and utility coordination, obviously very high risk for us on this corridor. And one of the biggest ones we have is they're going through the new system interchanges, a existing 86-inch line that crosses Sabre 37 on I-465 and eventually upsizes to 90-inch and 96 inches. This one's on its own is a $10 million move with very high risk to our system interchange. And I think I want to highlight the main kind of feature, I'd say, of this corridor. I talked about all those statistics about the pavement structures and all the earthwork involved and the utilities. But really what it comes down to is the people side of thing. Here is just the organizational chart for one of those contracts that is involved just from INDOT's side. You can see, obviously you can't see the names, but the point is, it is a very large team with very large communication needs, and which kind of explains what I have later in the presentation of why we need to do the things we do and what we've tried to do to innovate. And just to get a glimpse on the labor of this job, you can see just some of these numbers. These are actual man-hour shifts here in the thousands. Total since this job started in 2020, we've had 152,000 days of work from individuals out here just on the labor side of things. And including it one day, we actually had 569 workers out here. So the level of coordination and communication that is required on this corridor, you can tell, is immense. So the challenge would be, how do we accomplish this with all these people? So taking a step back is asset management. What are we doing for asset management? What's INDOT's plan going forward? I want to have a quote here from Dr. Stephen Covey: begin with the end in mind. And I think that's really kind of sums up what INDOT feels is the best approach to basically how our workflows and processes are going to be when it comes to design, construction, and asset management. We feel that really the asset management is the most important. We need to take care of those assets that we have and maintain them. So about a year or two ago, we did a joint research project with Purdue University. We often do these on various studies on many different aspects in the transportation business, but this one in particular was labeled was SPR 4211. You can find this online, but the research project was infrastructure information modeling. It was a study based off what is the best practice, what processes should we do to get to that end in mind. So I think the common in our current workflow was a push method of your design. You turn it into PDFs, you push it out to construction. They do a red line as-built, and then they hand it off, and maybe some of that red line as-built is useful. Maybe it was performed, maybe it wasn't performed. How accurate was it? But each time you push it along, there was kind of some fall off. And if what's most important in our agency is our assets and the operations and maintenance, that's the longer lifespan of these things we're building with our people's tax dollars, that maybe we need to shift that priority. So this study kind of indicated, we propose to do a pull-based workflow. We should say, what does asset management need? And then based off what do they need, let's figure out how construction can deliver that. And based off how construction deliver it, what does design need to hand off to construction and to enable them to hand off what asset management needs? So that was the way we're trying to approach it today, is to change that workflow, that order of priority. Currently today, we have a post-construction asset inventory data collection manual. So for the meantime, before we get to that, the fully realized plan, we still need a way of getting our assets into some sort of a database that we have record of. Our primary source is ArcGIS, is where we have all of our assets. And until we had this workflow and this design process in place, we still need a way to get them in there. So we have a manual that highlights how to manually get those assets in there. Here's just a list of all the different assets that we care to put into GIS to maintain for our maintenance department to go out there and to maintain, to repair as needed. And so we need to know where all those at. We need to know things about them so we can properly repair them. So here's just a list of the many things that we care to, between the many drainage resources that are underground, a lot of our safety assets like our lighting and our signing and our guardrail, and then other just roadway assets that require maintenance that often can get hit and need maintenance. So as I said before, here's just an example of one of the more difficult ones to do is our underground assets there with our drainage. So just as an example, highlight some of these. We have different types of features. We have point features such as inlets and manholes. And then we have some of the linear features such as our small culverts or gravity sewers that are closed drainage. And so the current process, like I said, is kind of a manual effort. And what we have right now is an asset collector that uses Esri to get that information. This is what it looks like right now, that you pull up this Esri collector app, and essentially you go out in the field. It has GPS locations. It is highly recommended that you have a GPS booster on your device you're using, be it a cell phone or a tablet, to get that GPS accuracy that we want to get these within a certain tolerance. And so essentially you just go out in the field with this tablet in hand, with this app open, and you add a point, for instance, for a culvert here, add a point, and you say you start streaming. So you walk from one invert to the other. It's pretty simple, gets it in there. And then later there's other materials such as you see as the type of pipe, the material, it's steel. We have invert information in there as well. But there's a hypothesis. This is a very manual effort, as we talked about. So the hypothesis here is, we were sending out survey crews, maintenance crews to find all these pipes, just driving around. But the idea is, when is the best time to collect it? And the hypothesis here is, it feels like the best time to collect this when we're out there in construction. We have MOT set up, we have safety devices. So that is what we're looking into now. They're actually exposed. So when we talk about those underground assets, you can actually have the invert elevation. You see where it is. You can clearly see the pipe. It's not covered up. So there's many reasons why we think that construction would be the best time to do this. And then you also have the staff actually out there confirm that size and location. So sometimes the survey crews get sent out before a job and they don't always identify the correct size of pipe, be it circular, elliptical, and whatnot. And that makes a big difference on the design. So to have that certainty and that accuracy, that the crew's boots on the ground there, to have the clear access, can see that and document it. And then the post-construction process could be utilized during construction. So right now it's after the fact. It's other crews going out there that have to practically remobilize without traffic control. And so we're trying to realize that during construction and cut out that step. And then also, like I said, stormwater assets, sometimes these pipes are one thing, but then you talk about your under drain outlets and all those things. They're very small. And once grass gets going, can often be missed. And that's where issues pop up when we have buried assets that we don't know about and then cause problems down the line. And then also that we have our inspector out there that is doing all this. It is a benefit. It is a time savings, but what if we can improve this process even more so than the manual effort? So then the theory here is, if I have a plan set and I have these pipes that are designed, if they're built according to plan, why do I then need to manually add them in, like I showed you before, with adding the point and streaming it? Instead, the idea would be, what if I had the design line work that could be already incorporated into GIS as a layer, and then all I have to do as an inspector that is identifying these drainage features and locations, inverts, manhole locations, that indeed it is where it said it's supposed to be in the design. If it was not, we would have a construction change that would update the design drawing. So once again, we should have an accurate location on the design plans itself. And so the findings we had from this effort is that we could change the overall alignment production schema. We could add some attribute information afterwards that we can't put in the design, but there's some things in the vendor status that you put, like such as designed here, that will allow the actual line work itself to meet the requirements that were set forth in that post-construction asset collection manual. And so here, as you see, this is kind of a glimpse of if you were to look at all of our drainage features in Indiana and kind of zoomed out view, this is kind of what you get. Obviously, there's a lot of culverts, liners, a lot of drains, all kinds of drainage features. So appearing from afar, it's going to be quite extensive to look at. But this is the end product. So in general, if you're starting in their next project, you would go to this map, say, I want to just work in this area right here. I could get a snapshot of what we have there. What are the existing assets? So I can have a maintenance plan, or if then my next design project comes up that are within those limits, they can get a good idea of what is existing, where they're at, invert elevation, size, and material pipe opening, and what kind of condition they're in, just from a GIS, a view that we do share online. So some of the steps we're taking on some of these current jobs. So you can say, yeah, it'd be great. I want to do this. I want to have my line work incorporated GIS, but we got to get that into our contracts. It's hard to ask for that after the fact. So the effort was made on multiple contracts to get that information in there. So at least we have the information. Maybe it's not perfect, but we did ask for it. We'll get something and we won't have to do something after the fact. So one thing we did is to help with identifying some of these assets is to require on our contract, our design build contracts, to get some extra drone or UAS photography with LiDAR capabilities that can get a good 3D imagery of not only the post-construction, but we want to know what we had before too. And this is especially useful when we're talking about the existing pavement conditions and some of the official detour routes. We want to leave the city assets or the state assets the way we found them, and with all the different maintenance of traffic phases that we have and other detours and unofficial detours that we're going to have to utilize for traffic, it would be best to have the best type of documentation to really document pre and post the effects that happen on here. And then finally, the requirement we have is just to require that, like I said, the as-built condition of the finalized project in that LiDAR level 3D imagery. And then we could take that and really help boost our asset collection and quicker than the manual effort by using technology. Another new thing also we have attempted on this corridor as well is requiring the utilities to be as-built to the point where they are incorporated into these same record drawings that we're requiring from our contractors that will have the as-built elevations in three dimensions that can also be incorporated in GIS. This also goes with the parcel information. On this corridor, we had a combination of total and partial takes of up to 800 parcels. So since we made that effort, let's go ahead and get that also those as a layer in our GIS, so we have the new limits of those parcel takes in the GIS database. And so what are we doing with all that? What's INDOT doing? So now that we have a process to get all this information into GIS, it can enable us to look at our assets and our condition of our assets and when they are in need of maintenance or a new contract. And the idea going forward is we have the ability to run some processes and schemas to identify the areas of need of these, but also what's nearby them. If I were to bundle these, if I were to create a corridor out of these nearby assets that need maintenance, what could I save? How much money could I save? And I know this picture is kind of small, but you can see there is a lot to be said. There's a lot of inefficiencies, especially when regarding maintenance of traffic. If you can set up the zone once and bundle a lot of these assets into one project, we are able to do that now, especially with all these assets we got into our GIS system. And so with that as well, we are starting to get more to 20-year plans on these. We can project program contracts in this bundling nature up to 20 years or more, and it can be filtered in many different ways per fiscal year and whatnot for funding purposes. So as I started this piece and portion about asset management, I want to go back to beginning with the end in mind. And with the beginning of a lot of this process that I'm going to go through and I've gone through so far was actually a presentation given from Autodesk back in early 2020 about what can ACC do for you. And actually their slides they had in there had the exact same quote there with begin with the end in mind. And they share the same kind of methodology of I need to get the data rich assets into GIS connection. And their software can do all these things that we need them to do to get to that end goal. So that was one of the main pieces of while on these major projects, as you'll see going forward, that we have adopted it with that frame of mind that if we want to get there, we need to have the correct software to get us there. And then even further into the future, right now we're talking about points and lines, but there is the capability with ArcGIS Pro and ACC to be able to realize the full model into GIS and into the point where it's not just an export import. It's a connection. It's a back and forth. Anything I update on the model updates GIS and vice versa. So that's the eventual vision that we'd like to see. We'd like that interconnectability so that we have that full life cycle from design, construction, and as I mentioned, and back into design for the next job. We want that accuracy. We want all that metadata there to do for all purposes of planning for INDOT. So I'll head into the project management to just kind of give you a highlight overview of all the things we're doing on the project level now that we've gotten into construction and what we're using with ACC. And so just kind of wanted to share a quote here that from Maya Angelou that do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And it's kind of just an inside joke in the office, as a lot of times when, with facing adversity and the challenges we face on this immense corridor, that sometimes the answer is we just need to do better in order to accomplish this challenge and to deliver this project. And so this saying just means a lot and kind of goes into why we're doing the things we're doing. Could have just met status quo and did business as usual. I'm utilizing the conventional means of how we deliver these projects and the way we communicate. But we thought there is something out there better. There is something we can do and adopt to be better. So we need to do it. And so we reached out before these jobs led to construction. I met with Autodesk and say, what can you do for us? So they introduced us to BIM 360. And you'll see some of the slides later of what the things we're doing BIM 360. And then lately, in the past year, they have upgraded to the AC platform to use their build program. And so it's a lot of the same things as BIM 360, but with some more features. So the vision here, and going back to what asset management is, my previous slide to what we're doing today in construction is I'm going to take one of the presentations we have coming up later in the year from my colleagues. The presentation style, securing today's technology for tomorrow's advancements. So I really liked how that was worded. We can sit here and research all day and every day about what's the best way to do it, but we know we need to secure something today to set that foundation in order to innovate, in order to progress, one that we believe has all the tools that we need looking forward 3-5 years in the future, that where we need to be, this is the technology we need to adopt now to begin that process. And because some of the things we talk about is we have this technology we talk about, but the standards and protocols or specifications, they haven't been adopted on a large scale. With technology in mind today, we have a lot of processes that are limited based off of way we could do things. So now that technology enables us to do things better and faster, and maybe we should sit back and think, what can I do differently? How should I rewrite this? How can we do things better? And why should we do things? Overall, these things enable us to collaborate more, to be more effective, reduce risk, and to increase communications. And I think it's time to take a look at that. One of the things that we talk about security in today's technology, it would not be fair to try to find one software that does it all, but we do want to find someone that can work with people, work with different softwares and vendors that can do the things they can't do, create that connection. And so with ACC, what we found desirable about their platform is that they do share and they open source a lot of their connections or have the ability to connect either with APIs or recipes or whatnot. And so here's just like a screenshot of some of the many different vendors and partner cards that they do have connections with that we've already created. Especially desirables, like I said earlier, is the GISs or asset management platform. So and ACC Autodesk has a very good connection and partnership with Esri, who also is part of that. But then there's so many other ones. So for instance, our service uses a program called ServiceNow. We were able to connect with them as well to help with their business needs. And I'll go over that a little bit later. Here's just another example of partner cards we directly can put on a dashboard on these jobs that we're managing. We've recently done some business with EarthCam that can put a live camera up and at our new system interchange to document in a time-lapse video or live feed the progress being made there. And also another example is connecting with Power BI and get a good view of, and this is even with SharePoint, this job has a kind of a joint split between using SharePoint and ACC just due to the time of when things were developed and when we were able to get our licenses. But either way, you can see that this is actually a SharePoint workflow and I'm related with ACC, but can be brought in on a partner card and utilized. One of the big things to do and what we like about ACC is a shared environment. We want to develop a culture with our partners on this corridor, with our designers, our contractors, with the department and the agency. We need a shared environment. There's not many things that we need to keep secret with our partners because that's what they are. So we want to have all those shared folders on ACC. But not only that, is we want to also have some organization to those folders if we're going to share them. So we phase one here, we've got a naming convention and one of our manuals set up to say this is how we should name each one of these documents depending on what they are, and here's examples of those. And then later using ACC, they actually have a naming convention standard software built into ACC, and so it'll even prompt you how to properly name it so you can match the naming standard here to what our manual says, because today's standards and expectations anymore is people are less likely to pick up and read a manual. So if you can have it built into the software that prompts you, hey, make sure you do name it when you first do it. The adoption and the success rate of and the uniformity and consistency of actually realizing these business rules and standards is far better. So that's kind of what we're doing on that environment. Is just an example of the plans. What ACC does well is that they have the ability to put the plans on there. This is a snapshot of one of our contract documents using the ACC build platform. It's very clear when you add projects to there, the page sheets, what the title block is, what version is it. So here you can see just from here, that's our main project number. But then this sheet right here, you can tell has an update to it. But you always know that the most updated plan sheet is on top. And this came from Construction Change 2. If you were interested in what Construction Change 2, you could go to one of our shared folders that has the construction changes. So once again, very clear, very transparent, and to everybody on the team involved that what the plan is going forward, what are we doing, why are we doing it. And it actually involves less communication because of the organization, because of the versioning, and because of the software allows you to do. It allows for a much clearer expectations on what we need to do going forward. Another example, if we zoom in just to a plan sheet itself, so like that one before had a construction change, this is on the design build front, so a little different in naming, but essentially you can see the most up-to-date plan sheet is on top. Here's some red lines on what happened, and it's because of this FDC, we call it a design change. And there's actually a hyperlink on the sheet itself, taking you right directly to why it changed. So once again, this doesn't require emails or phone calls saying, hey, we're changing this plan sheet because of this. It's into the system. It gets updated for the user out in the field, for the inspector. There's no questions on what we need to go forward. They have it right there when they need it and not have to look in their email, find the email, remember when they got the email. It's what we like to call on-demand communication. And then finally, on one of our jobs, we're getting into the 3D model. How could we use the 3D model from the start to the finish? So that our ORX project, which is our Ohio River Bridge crossing down near Vincennes, Indiana, southwest part of the state, crossing the Ohio River, they're really looking into, start using the 3D model from the start, handing off to construction to more fully realize this life cycle I talked about in the start of this presentation on the pull method. We know they need these attributes. We know construction needs this. Let's start now with it. Let's get it in there now from the front end. And so this design build can then be able to turn that over and much more seamlessly and streamlined. One of the things with this project too, as I mentioned, with the project plans, the ability to create roles on the project very easily as an administrator to on the job. So what we try to live by on our jobs is that we have communication by organization. When I said there's less emails, less phone calls needed, is because we have clear roles and responsibilities on each one of our contracts, and we can put them in here as such. So if there's a certain issue that come up with regarding this or this, as an individual on the job, when you saw that org chart, there's hundreds of people on here, and with people moving in and out, and unfortunately there is some turnovers. But instead, if the admin can just add the role to the individuals on that job, you don't have to even know names anymore for a submittal, an issue, RFI. You just list the role and you know it goes to the right person because that was set up front and properly done. And then another example of the power of the ACC is just being able to keep track of all your issues or action items on the job. It's very clear when you add this. You can add an issue on the job. You can add photos, plan sheets, whatnot. You can create an issue for about anything on this software. And then you can add in any people. You can have different categories. You can see who's it's assigned to. This is assigned to an individual, or this is assigned to a role. This job here is came up with on these certain issues. This is who's going to be added, assigned to what role, and who's the people involved with the roles. So it makes it very easy for communication to happen and problems and issues to be solved on a team level versus I call this person and I call this person. And they have to contact many different people and steps along the way. And it can solve those in a team. And then same thing with RFIs. We have, like I said, with our partners on the job, it's not just INDOT and our contractors, our designers as well. We want everybody included. You can see just on an example of many RFIs that were up in the 200s, but we have just all this information, all this communication going back and forth directly in the software. So, these people, it's just the same as sending an email, but it's where it needs to be and organized all together. So anybody can find out any information. I could not being part of this contract, load up this project on my browser and just check on what's going on here, what happened. I could get a good history of the events. It's all organized right here properly. And finally, submittals. Like I said, this contract not even really involved with, but I was sent a one-off submittal to review this. I was able to receive the files. I could, within the file itself, it references certain issues in RFIs. I could say, okay, this submittal is referring these different RFIs. I can be caught up to speed just reading through those issues, all the correspondence in the program by hyperlinks, just clicking on things. I cannot be in the loop on these things, but I can find out all this information without me needing to call these people involved with this because of how organized things are and how things can be set up in the system. It's very effective. It allows your team to grow, essentially, if you have more people able to help with the ways the system's set up. Some of the other things we're doing when we talk about partner cards and inclusions, we feel like the platform can handle some of these other needs we have out in the field. And so one of the things we've been using out there is Survey 123. Essentially, it's a kind of a one-off where it's a simple questionnaire. You have via a UR code, order saving as a favorite on an internet site on your tablet or phone, but it's a simple questionnaire to add. Basically, in this case, it's our stormwater management features and erosion control features. You can see that the GPS location's right there. If it's not right, you can actually drag and drop the right spot. And just some simple drop downs and questions is all you need to do. And then it leads to just getting all those points added to a GIS layer on the map. You can easily click on any one of these points and it'll show you all that information that was added on that last screen. And anybody can save this map as a bookmark or whatnot, or there's a URL code for this, but very easy to approach some of these widespread. I mean, we have a job with this many miles on it with a team of hundreds of people. It can often be hard to get these action items taken care of and stay on top of them, really. So you'll just have a map view like this, knowing that, yeah, this next week I'm going to be in this area, so I better open up this map, see what things need to be accomplished here. And so while I'm there, I'll go ahead and take care of them. And there's also ways to fill in the same questionnaire that shows it's repaired. You can take a photo, say I repaired on all the state. It changes colors, and you can see the different kind of status color points you have down there. One of the biggest pieces that we talk about when it comes to delivering these projects on time, sharing information, partnering with our contractors and designers, is the prioritization of schedules on this corridor. This job would not be possible to deliver without an emphasis on a quality schedule, maintaining the schedule, and talking about the schedule and sharing in the risks. Just a glimpse, a snapshot of top 3 critical paths, really dissecting the schedule, understanding our risks, and not just focusing on one, just the critical path is this, or I need to get this done, is what is our total exposure? Where are we at? Or are things trending a certain way? It's a communication piece and planning tool in itself. And so the team just put a heavy emphasis on this to enable us to be proactive, to foresee things that are coming up. When I talk about there's hundreds of utility moves here, those impact construction activities. They're not all moved by the time construction starts. So there's way too many things going on, many paths are going on, many different people doing those paths that, and any one of those things could cause the overall job to delay and not finish to deliver on time. Here's just kind of the review. We definitely prioritize and we value that transparency. We want those expectations. We want everybody to be on the same page. So very clearly, every month we go through this overall schedule. We look at all of our different intermediates. It's not just one substantial completion. We have many different commitments we got to meet on each individual contract that have their own path to completion and their own impacts that can delay those. So we want to make it very clear every month. Here's the contractor flow distribution. Here's the department. Here's our total one. So this job here had actually just the utility impact that they got them a little bit, and this actually went through the winter, so it's not as bad as it looks. But the key is it's still everybody is on the same page. They know where we're at. And then we can talk about what are the different things and opportunities we can do to catch that back up. So months in advance, we can start talking about a plan that mitigates this, and maybe this negative flow never happens to be overcome. And what has happened in the past 2 years on this corridor is that has indeed been the case. We have overcome every bit of negative flow that was generated, the multiple impacts that have happened, but we saw them months in advance. We were able to devise the best plan versus this is the only plan we have left because of the timing. As we go forward, similar to the other features, this new technology has come out since we started. So the ACC tool has their own scheduling tool that has a ton of potential. And from a scalability, this is in a training effort, much easier to adopt than in a robust scheduling program like Primavera. So to be able to get in here on your tablet, on your phone, on your laptop, click some very intuitive, modern buttons and actions, get you what you need to do. So being able to have this tool has enabled our team to not just share the schedule with the P6 experts out there, but with everybody really. And because of how important the schedule is, everybody should know where we're at, where we need to be. It's really a sharing of goals for the entire team down to the field level to the management level. And we all need to be on the same page on where we need to be and when and why. And so this tool is starting to open the possibility that it's accessible to everybody and very easily. Here's just an example of that. I could be sitting in the office. Meanwhile, one of my field people actually are making comments directly from their tablet on the activities of P6. So I get live updates on the P6 activities when this bridge right here is complete or this deck is complete. I get a comment there and I also get a photo. So I got a timestamp. Here we get on September 19th. This bridge deck obviously is done. You see that the bridge covered. Here's the location on the maps. So it verifies location to the P6 activity. Very powerful tool to make sure that our progress is being made when we need to be made, and all this activity is up that field personnel can look at. When were we supposed to have this bridge check done? Do we have something to be concerned on? We get that live feedback, on-demand communication when we need it. That could make a difference when it comes to decisions out in the field. And another part of the tool that is very promising as well is to be able to just view where we are compared to this month versus last month, and what has happened in between and why it happened, and to be able to step back and look how are we doing? What do we need to do differently? Where are we trending? What opportunities and risks we have? And so this is very easy to just click on a couple buttons to get there. In order to perform this exercise using scheduling software, it takes many more clicks and steps and time to do. And maybe it doesn't show as much information, but it shows enough that you need. And for any individual with little training can perform and get that value. And one of the other themes we have when it came to the schedule is being accountable and transparent again with where we are on our schedule. So another one of the hot spots in construction is where our utility locations are at. I don't know how it is in Wisconsin, but notoriously in Indiana, they don't seem to be relocated on time. And that's okay. If we know that and we can share that information, we can plan accordingly. So every week we sit down and we filter our schedule to only show utilities, and we include the columns of what are a baseline show and what's the anticipated completion show for that based off the field communication with those utility coordinators and contractors. Know when it's going to be moved, and based off of that and the connections we spent on the baseline, identifying how this utility impacts which construction activity, we can therefore see this is how far behind we are with our date in the contract book, but this is how far we're behind to when the contractor needs it. So we can identify this is a problem or this is a priority. Let's focus. Let's maybe take a crew off of this telecom, move and put them over here because that's where it impacts the schedule. And so doing that each week, our contractor knows that we're doing all that we can to prioritize and mitigate any types of impacts on the job instead of maybe not sharing that information. And you can see, no one likes to show that you're behind, but bad news doesn't get better over time. So let's sit down and talk about it and share that information very clearly with our contractors. Just some other pieces of you, just the progress meetings in general. We'd like to do live minutes, live agendas. We want to make sure it's important what we discuss on these meetings, and we want people to get busy, and whether they review minutes or not, it's kind of hit or miss. But if we do them live, people can read them as they happen and make comments there, and then we get the best minutes we have to capture that. And we have the ACC tool that we're using on some of our jobs, very clear on what it does, has action items on it, has due dates assigned to people. And it's very easy to see. It's just a hyperlink to that agenda. It never changes on the same location or it's at, so very useful for the team. And then another SharePoint version we have on some of the other jobs that aren't utilizing that tool yet. And we still have a live agenda that we share via a hyperlink to SharePoint. And once again, it's always there available, where it's at. It's a team contribution, these agendas with the participation as well. And so to kind of sum up all these different ideas, all this partnership and this transparency and the sharing information earlier in this year, just when I'm one of our partnering facilitated meetings, as often we do some surveys to just get a snapshot, a health of the project, how people feel about the job, the effort put in the schedule. I thought was one of the coolest surveys I'd ever seen on that. It was a unanimous 5 out of 5s from everybody in the team, being contractor, department. And I have never seen that sort of feedback unsolicited before on a contract project. So it kind of shows that our efforts have paid off, and it was very encouraging. And just some of the other superlatives and comments we got from our contractors and our team members on there saying how this is the best project, collaboration's excellent, this is standard for others to follow. So just when you see things like that, that this investment that was spent, this adoption, this leap of faith, it's to try something new, to try different things we haven't tried before, is really paying off, and it's showing with both the comments we get on these surveys and just in reality when you see the progress and that we made out on the projects. And just kind of wrapping this up, another thing that our major projects and on the finish line has taken a lot of time and pride in the public involvement on this corridor. You can see the I69finishline.com. That's a site if you want to check that out. Just a glimpse on the many things they show progress. Of course, we got to stay with our finish line racing theme, being an Indianapolis job, but there's many different updates and just extensive amount of communication on restrictions, closures, timing, all that thing, just photos. Very impressive what the public involvement team does on this corridor to make sure that we do prioritize the public and we are keeping their best interest at heart in all the things we do in planning on this corridor. Just an example, in 2021 alone, we got 816 different customer service inquiries that came through via phone call, internet, posts, or whatnot. And like I said earlier on those partner cards, we actually were able to connect via recipes those inquiries that come through directly into our ACC issues. So we cut out the middleman and all the emails that would traditionally happen when we get these phone calls. They just go directly to those issues, because if there's a customer service issue, we do take those serious. We don't ignore our public. We want to look into what their concerns are because oftentimes they do have a valid point. So we want to make sure we get all those customer service inquiries and then follow up on them and resolve those for them. And that is it for the presentation here. I'd like to thank your time and listening. I will stay on the line to answer any questions you have. Thank you.